The Passamaquoddy Indians, numbering about 1,000, have two reservations in eastern Maine, Pleasant Point near Eastport and Indian Township near Princeton. Prior to the arrival of the European, the Passamaquoddy Indian was nomadic. Migration was a way of life. Few specifics are known, but it's generally assumed Passamaquoddy tribal families moved inland along Maine's extensive rivers to hunt in the fall and winter. In the spring, they returned to the coast to fish. Their migrations were seasonal and centered around food-gathering activities.
They used to go from here and go to the ocean and cut sweetgrass and dry fish, dry their fish for the winter supply. See, this is what I heard about old people years ago here. Of course, I didn't see it, this generation, I never see anyone doing it. But the old people used to. That's what I heard.
The men folks will go hunting. And they get a lot of wild meat. So that will last all winter. And they go out and fishing. Also, they get those paupers. They dry that paupers so that will last all winter. That wouldn't spoil. And so that's how they have their meals years ago. Wild meat and fish. They dry up those fish. And the paupers, they fix that up so they won't spoil all winter.
I like to see somebody, make living out of trapping. It probably starve to death. Sure. This is just a hobby. A lot of people, everybody likes to trap. Like muskrats in the spring. Then in the fall, you trap, everything. Then in January, that's just a beaver and otter only. And, of course, you can't trap rats through the ice. And trap them in the houses if you can get away with it. The city life, I don't believe I could live. Oh, it's too many people and no lakes nowhere, and God. And I don't believe I could stay. I gotta be where there's water. I love water, and I love to go in the woods. And no matter if I don't earn anything, I just love to, cruise along the shorelines, just work along and go out in the evenings and have a cookout, and that's the life. The city life. No, I don't believe I'd live a week. I'm going to fish this afternoon if it doesn't rain or snow. And of course it's cold. I'm going to, or it'll be salmon. It'll be salmon. Salmon are running good in here now.
Lolasaka Basin maintains a lifestyle that resembles the old Indian way. Most Indians born on the reservation, however, live very different lives. Ralph Dana and his family.
I was born here on the Indian reservation, and the first time I moved was probably about 25 years ago. I went to Medford, Massachusetts at that time because there was lack of work around this area. Consequently, I got a job with Raytheon Company and worked for Raytheon for about 22 years.
Life in Boston is fast and competitive, and there's all these time slots. You have to be here a certain time. You have to be there for a certain amount of time, and you have to be to work exactly on the hour you're supposed to be there. And at home, it's different. Time isn't that important as long as you get the work done.
Every summer, we'd come back and spend a few weeks here. And the past few summers, the feeling was that the kiddos didn't want to go back after my 3 weeks vacation were over. So we made arrangements where they could stay, or my wife stayed with the family, and I went back to work in Boston for the rest of the summer. I would come back and pick up the family at Labor Day. I could feel then that this is what they want. And this is what I always wanted. We just we didn't force them. It seems to be natural.
I looked forward to it quite a bit because it's quite different from that of living in an urban community such as the area around Massachusetts. The life's a lot slower, a lot quieter, and I felt that I was getting away from a lot of things like, well, just pollution and, you know, everything that's associated with large cities, and that I was moving to an area where the community was much more intimate and friendly at the time than that which I left.
Uncle Bill's had quite a bit of success with his fishing at Pleasant Point. Just the other night he came to the house and he had 500 codfish in his truck, and he asked us if we wanted a few, and I said, well, I'll take a couple. I wasn't aware that he had the 500 codfish in his truck. I went out there to look, and I said, and he says, when I say few, I mean a few, not just a couple. So your mommy came out, looked at the catch, and she says, well, why don't we take 20 of them and salt them away? We had quite a bit of problems salting the fish there. We spent the whole evening cutting up the fish. What I wasn't aware of, that the following night, he comes back with another truckload. He says, don't you want some more? I says, no, I'm loaded now. I have trouble getting rid of the heads. He also talked me into going down helping him. He says, if there's any lobster in there, you can have the lobster. And I spent 4 hours helping him. There was no lobster in the catch. So that was a free run for me and for him, too.
I think my father always wanted to move back home. It was really where he felt more comfortable and more relaxed. And I think me and my brother and my sisters and also my mother, we did influence him. I think we just made him a little bit more aware of what he really wanted to do. The reason he was not on the reservation was so that he could have a job and support his family, you know, but it was at the expense of him being really happy. And so we would go home on school vacations, and we would come back to Boston, and we would talk about how it was at home and how this person was doing and that person. And then he, you know, he heard us, and it just brought back the feeling to him, I think, of how it was back there, and he just wanted to go, too.
I was seeking, again, the reestablishment, I guess the rebirth of Indianness. I just felt that I was no longer alone, and my children were a big influence on this. I have 3 teenage kiddos that are going to school, and they've always said, well, Dad, this is where I want to be, on the reservation. They've had a taste of Indian reservation life because we've always came back.
Being in school where there's no other Indians is the thing that I ran up against the most was people asking me, you know, if I lived in a teepee. You know, here I am in Medford, Mass, and they want to know if I live in a teepee. And it wasn't so much a malicious thing, but it was more ignorance than anything else. You know, they just didn't know, and they had no way to know how it really was, because this is what they were getting in school. And this is what they gave me in school, this stuff about teepees and savages and everything else. And I used to get very angry with the teachers, you know, because I thought that they should know better than that, or at least question it. And some of them didn't even question it.
And I found that every time an Indian won a battle, it was called a massacre. Every time the American Army won one, it was called a battle. And just that it depicted the Indian as someone who was stupid and savage, which is not the true case at all. In many cases, it was quite the opposite.
Your public school system has to look upon some sort of a hero and somebody to trample on. And I always felt that they picked the Indian as the person to be trampled on. I got that feeling when I went to school here, even on the Indian reservation. And when my kiddos would come home, I would always tell them, no, be proud, this is not so. I even contacted the teachers, and I says, well, could you possibly dwell a little bit about the Indian history? And they said, well, this is the way it reads, and it would take some time. And the majority of the students or white. There is one Indian student in the family, or in the classroom rather. I just really couldn't accept this. It sort of drove me back to the reservation where the problems were all the same, that I was with a group that said, okay, Ralph, this is where we're at. I mean, a negative self-image is the product that we have to accept. I just can't accept that. Everybody wants to be recognized as an individual. I think this is one of the big things that prompted us to move back, to share our problem with Indian people.
There was a thing about an Indian symbol. The symbol for Dartmouth used to be an Indian, and a lot of the people couldn't understand why this Indian with war paint on and everything and was not accepted by the Indians here. They used to have a mascot going out on the field, war whooping and everything at the football games, and some of these people just couldn't understand why we didn't go along with that.
I had an experience with my youngest child about just before I moved back. He was about 4 years old at the time. He's 8 now. And he came in crying. He says, Daddy, there's Indians out there. This is Halloween night. And I said to myself, wait a minute, there's something wrong here again. We're not doing our homework, Mummy. And consequently, we took young Ralphie and took him in the room, explained to him, and we've concentrated on that. Just, you're an Indian, this is what you are, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have everything in the world to be proud that you're an Indian. And it's something that when I went to school, they didn't project this. You came out with a negative attitude. You're almost something less than human. And we've survived, and I think the Indian people will always survive.
Francis Nicholas is governor of the reservation at Pleasant Point near Eastport.
Well, I would like to attract all these people that left the reservation when they were younger. I'd like to have them come back. And if we could get housing and jobs and whatever for them, I think we can attract them to come in and live and populate, you know, as Indians, you know. I hate to see the Passamaquoddy tribe sort of disappear. A lot of Indians that came back after they've been away, they want to be identified more as Indians. You can see them walking around here. Some of them wear bands and long hair and Indian jackets and stuff like that. You know, they want to be identified as an Indian, more so than the people that's been on the reservation.
You have to take into consideration that these people, having lived away from the reservation, are now aware of the way the non-Indian society works. And they bring back this knowledge with them. And we do have to deal with the non-Indian society. There's no getting away from that. We're not that isolated. And the knowledge they bring back helps us in this way. And they can use it for the benefit of the tribe as a whole.
And we've put a lot of emphasis in my family about education. I think that this is probably the only way that the Indian people can survive. We lack a lot of Indian leadership. The fact that they've thrust upon us Indian self-determination without leadership is something that the Indian people have to deal with at this time.
Clive Dorr is head of the Housing Authority at the Pleasant Point Reservation.
In the past, before the Housing Authority was started, we've had anywhere from 1 to 3 to 4 families living in 4, 5, 6 rooms, I think. And this contributed to any type of social problems. I think there's a very high crime rate here, and it gave an overall outward picture to the white community of anyone on the reservation, stay away from them because they're bad type attitude.
I've always wanted to move back before, but there was no place to live until they come up with these new homes, and they selected my name, and that's the reason I'm back, you know, for this new house and everything, and I got a place to live now. That's what I've always really wanted, and that's what I got now, so. Come on. It's going to take quite a bit for me to leave now.
Back 15, 18 years ago, there was a major change in the reservation due to the construction of a new highway into Eastport. And this sort of opened up the Indian community to the public. in that they were exposed to the continuing traffic and the dilapidated condition of the homes and everything. The net result of the road going through here has made us aware that, you know, we have to provide something better just to maintain the Indian community, because migration then, I think, had increased quite a bit to the cities. So in the late 60s, we come through and established a housing authority, finally got going out after the available funds that were for minorities in the country, and, you know, gone about improving the living conditions on the reservation and trying to establish an economic base here.
We had to put $500 in for the house. Both me, my wife, and my mother-in-law, and even my father-in-law come out and help. A couple of my brothers and a couple other people helped us put ours in. It's really, $500 is really a long time to try to do something on the side when you get a regular job. You know, it's real hard, but it paid off.
We're trying to build an economic base here so that we can afford the houses that are being built on the reservation. Because if you don't have the money to support the houses, then the houses are going to be deteriorating, and we're going to be right back where we were, say, 10 or 15 years ago. We're in hopes of establishing a fish processing plant for the salting and freezing of fresh fish from the bays out here, and there's a good chance that we can interest someone into establishing a small shopping center on the reservation. And this would, in turn, circulate a few dollars here that we hope to keep here for employment purposes. And the people moving back are sort of bringing back an education, a job, experience level that, you know, has been drained away for the past 20 years, I think, at least, if not more.
I would say that my father has done exactly that, because he, while we were in Boston, he did become involved with the Boston Indian Council, and he started to learn about proposal writing and the best way to deal with these federal administration and all this. And coming back to the reservation, some of the people who have never been off the reservation just don't know where to begin or who they have to go to find out what they want to know and things like this. And he's had a head start as far as that goes, but he hasn't lost anything in the process.
When we have federal funds coming in, they say, okay, here it is. Here's 25 grand. And they come back a year later and say, what did you do with it? They never prepared the people, you know, as to how this money should be spent. They kept sending letters, say, okay, a quarterly report is what we want now. These quarterly reports just didn't go in because the Indians are not used to that. The Indian leadership here is something real. When I was a kiddo here, that it was a dream then, and we kept hoping for it. But here it is, it's coming about.
I will definitely go back home as soon as I get done at Dartmouth. I came here because I know what I want to do. You know, I want to go back and help the community, either by teaching or possibly by getting into a law practice. But there's no question of whether or not I will go back home. I mean, that's where I belong, and I wouldn't be happy any other place.
I think that's the trend. Go back to the reservation. This is where it's at. This is where your Indianness is. I think that's why that's sometimes forced assimilation. Legislature is passed occasionally to have the Indian move off. About 6 years ago, they even doled out money. Said, we'll set you up in Chicago, in Cleveland, or Detroit, and we'll give you a couple grand. Get out there and get set up. Get an apartment. It didn't work. Those Indians went and spent the money, come back and said, okay, I still want to be on the reservation. And the determination is there. You can't change it. I hope the mainstream of American society will accept that.
The preceding program was presented under the auspices of the Maine State Department of Educational and Cultural Services and WCBB.